My name's Ciara Owens and I'm a speech and language therapist for NHS Lanarkshire. This video will provide an explanation or overview of what phonological or sound awareness is, what skills come under the umbrella of speech sound awareness, and when children are typically able to understand and use these skills. We'll also look at why sound awareness is such an important skill and give you some information on what resources you can access to support your child with this. So what is sound awareness? Sound awareness is a set of skills that help us understand and manipulate or change words and sounds. So think about different ways of building up and breaking down sentences and words into smaller pieces. Sound awareness is a listening skill and not a written skill, which means that we can do it with our eyes closed. And it's about the way that a word is put together rather than the meaning of the word. So for example, if we ask the child which word was longer, caterpillar or train, a child with well-developed sound awareness would recognise that the word caterpillar has more syllables and more sounds and therefore is a longer word. A child with poorer phonological awareness skills might say train, since a train is a longer object than a caterpillar. Sound awareness is an umbrella term, which means that a fully developed awareness requires understanding of a variety of skills, and those skills are listening, loud and quiet sounds, auditory discrimination, word boundaries, rhyme, compound words, syllables, blending and segmenting, and single sound awareness, and I'll go on to explain these in a bit more detail. So the first skill that we'd expect children to develop by around 3 years is the ability to listen. And when we say listen, we don't simply mean the ability to hear, but is your child able to sit and pay attention and understand what is being asked of them and how this affects their environment or what they're doing? A good way to support this is by taking your child on a listening walk, where you might discuss the sounds that you can hear in the environment. This helps children tune into different sounds and encourages them to actively think about the sounds that they hear and what these mean. For example, I might hear a car in the distance and note that we may be near a road. The next skill we would expect to develop would be understanding loud and quiet sounds. So can your child identify and produce loud and quiet sounds? We would know that a child could use this skill when they're able to speak louder or more quietly when asked. Some parents might also describe this as inside and outside voices. The next skill that we'd expect to develop would be auditory or sound discrimination. And this is simply hearing the difference between two sounds. So can your child hear a difference between the words dog and log? This is a really important skill later in speech sound development, because if children can't hear the difference in sounds in adult speech, then they will struggle to hear them in their own speech and may not notice their errors. Children tend to master these first 3 skills by 3 years old, and typically they don't need to be taught, but children acquire them naturally through speaking and listening to the people around them. If this is something that you'd like to support your child in, then the UNICEF Kid Power website have a really nice document on listening games for kids that gives you examples of games like Simon Says and Pass the Whisper and how these support listening skills. The next skill is understanding word boundaries, and this means counting how many words are in a sentence and understanding when one word finishes and another word begins. So for example, we know that the sentence "I want some juice" has 4 words in it. It's important to note that children can understand language before they can use it themselves. So they might be able to count the words in a sentence that you say, but might struggle to produce a sentence when you ask, "Can you tell me a sentence with 4 words?" So children would typically understand word boundaries in your sentences at 2 to 3 years and be able to use it themselves at about 4 to 5 years. The next skill that we'll look at is rhyming, and we'd explain this to children as the end of the word sounds the same. If you're going to practice this with your child, you must first find out if they understand the concepts same and not the same, or same and different. It's easier to understand larger pieces of rhyme before individual words. This is because it provides more context and your child is given more time to compute what's being asked of them. So for example, they might understand that the phrases rhyme in "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are," before they understand that individual words rhyme, like star and car. Practicing rhyming can be fun because you can be really silly with it. So changing the words in rhymes your child knows. For example, twinkle, twinkle, chocolate bar, my dad drives an orange car, or even using nonsense words. So making up words and allowing your child to correct you. Would you like a banana or a bapple? There are some really good kids books for rhyming, so Room on the Broom and Oika are great examples of this. Or the free BookBuck app shows rhyming videos in the context of telling a story. The next skill we'd expect to develop would be compound words, and this is simply when we join two or more smaller words to make one larger word with its own meaning. So we might take the word butter and the word fly and make the word butterfly. There's a lovely downloadable book on compound words from All About Learning Press, and I'll link that at the end of the presentation. The next skill we'd expect to develop would be syllables, and we would describe syllables as a single unit of sound or how many claps are in a word. So for example, the word banana has 3 syllables and we could clap ba-na-na. If a child was struggling to understand syllables through clapping, then we might try saying words with a robot voice. So ba-na-na. This is another skill that you can practice during your day-to-day life. So you might clap out the syllables of different objects that you find around the house, or use funny robot voices to discuss what your child would like for dinner. So the next 2 skills are very similar, and the first one we'll come to is segmenting. Segmenting is when we separate the sounds in a word. So you would sound out the word as a child is reading it out loud and not how it is spelled. And it's important to be clear on the differences between a sound and a letter, as mixing these up can really confuse children when they begin to read and write. So what we would say is that a sound is a single unit that we hear or produce with one movement of our mouth, so d, sh, in song, or a. And a letter is a single unit that we would write down, so d or s. For example, in segmenting, cat would become k-a-t, and shop would become sh-o-p, because if we close our eyes and say the sound sh, we only hear one single noise. So blending is our next skill, and it's the reverse of segmenting. So this is when we join sounds together to make a word. For example, k-a-t becomes cat, and sh-o-p becomes shop. The last skill that we would expect to develop would be phonemic awareness or single sound awareness. And this is essentially when we identify beginning, middle and final sounds in words and manipulate or change these. So for example, we know that the word banana starts with a b sound and ends with an a sound. We know that the word chip starts with a ch sound and ends with a p sound. And we know that the words gate and goat both start with a g. So single sound awareness is any information that your child would know about individual sounds in a word or sentence. Parents often ask, when should my child learn these skills? As with learning anything, there are speech sound skills that are easier to learn and those that are a bit more difficult. So children won't understand and use these effectively all at once, but different skills will develop as they mature. Children might also not master one skill before they move on to the next one, as it's a really fluid process. Although I did give an outline during the last few slides of what age we'd expect these skills to develop, this learning process is a spectrum, and so all we'd say is that we would expect all children to learn these skills between the years of 2 and 6. Don't worry if there's a slight variation in the order or the age that your child is learning these. So why are sound awareness skills so important? This is a diagram of a language pyramid. It describes how a child's communication develops from birth to being able to use adult speech. The skills at the bottom of the pyramid are the earliest to develop, with speech sounds being the last to develop at the top of the pyramid. and sound awareness skills are vital to every level on here. So attention and listening skills are near the bottom of the pyramid, and so are the foundation to learning to communicate. The first three sound awareness skills that we discussed today are listening skills, and so support your child's ability to tune into adult speech and learn words and sounds, and to pay attention to what's being said. This supports them in listening and learning from you, from their environment, and later having the ability to sit and listen in a classroom. When understanding and producing speech, we subconsciously break down and build up language. So sound awareness skills are integral to the understanding and expressive language parts of the pyramid. And at the very top of the pyramid, we see that auditory discrimination, segmenting and blending are really important in producing speech sounds. Just because, as we discussed earlier, if a child can't hear differences in sounds in someone else's speech, then they'll also struggle to hear it in their own speech and not know when they're making errors. At a later stage in development, children have to use these skills to learn to read and write. So children must understand that words are made up of smaller sounds and be able to split and join these to transcribe them onto paper effectively. So let's look at some key points from the previous slides. The first that we'd say is that understanding comes before independently using skills, and that tasks should focus on the child hearing and understanding rather than using skills correctly. So if you are working on these skills with your child, make sure that you use positive praise for your child's attempts and understanding in speech rather than correctly pronouncing words and skills themselves. We have to remember not to confuse sounds and letters. So we know that gate and gem start with the same letter when they're written down, but if you close your eyes and listen, they begin with very different sounds. There are also many sounds which are two letters when written down, but one sound when eyes are closed. So sh, ng in song, ch and f. We have to remember to begin teaching rhyming with larger chunks of information and getting smaller, just to provide a bit of context to children. And most importantly, remember to have fun and not take your word playtime too seriously. So what can I do to help my child with this? Well, you're likely already practicing sound awareness with your child at home, so games like I Spy, singing nursery rhymes and using phrases containing words starting with the same sound like silly sausage are all great ways for your child to hear these skills in adult speech. The other thing is that children do typically build these skills naturally through playing with words and hearing adult models of speech. If you do feel that your child could use more support in sound awareness skills, have a look at our social media pages for more information, activities you can practice at home, and some example videos. If you would like to further support your child, I've linked some of the resources that we discussed today down below. So skills on listening, the BookBug app, different books that are good for rhyming, compound word books, and also a page on phonological or sound awareness activities created by speech therapists in Leeds.
You can follow NHS Lanarkshire Speech and Language Therapy Children and Young People Service on our social media, on Twitter at SLT North and at SLT South Lan, and on Facebook search for Speech and Language Therapy NHS Lanarkshire. You can contact us via our email address sltinquiry@lanarkshire.scot.nhs.uk or phone our helpline number on 01698 687 606.